You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Well, and welcome to episode 36 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltInPA.com. I am Walt White, and I want to thank you for the feedback that I got last week. I had a bit of a call to arms, and I asked for submissions for news. I was struggling to come up with interesting news content to do in the news portion of the podcast. All I kept digging up was just more and more and more Martin Zimmerman stuff, and I was just sort of really thirsty for something unique and something different and something interesting. And you guys really helped out. I had a couple of submissions from a couple of different people, and it really came through. I had some really interesting stuff to share with you this week. One of them I had to read like 2 or 3 times to get my head wrapped around it, but it was pretty interesting nonetheless. After we get through 3 pieces of news this week, I have 3 pieces of featured content. With 3 and 3, I guess we're back on track with a regular show. I'm going to try to streamline it a little bit. I don't want it to drag on too long. I'm liking these 45-minute 50-minute-ish episodes. For one, they're a little bit easier to manage as far as editing and uploading and processing goes, and it's just a little bit easier for me to get done in the course of an evening when time is crunched and I'm trying to get as much stuff done as possible. So but we're going to shoot for 45 to 50 minutes and see how it goes. Before we get into discussing the news, we have an ongoing contest going on at WaltInPA.com. When I say we, I mean I. It's just, I don't know, I typically say we for whatever reason. But I am running a variety of contests for the next 12 months, giving away a signed copy of Shoot, Your Guide to Shooting in Competition by Julie Golub. I'll be giving away 1 book per month for the next 12 months. The books come courtesy of StogieReview.com, who was kind enough to sponsor the contest. So if you haven't gone over to WaltInPA.com and entered to win the contest, please do so. I'm kind of hoping to see the entries bolster a little bit, and one lucky winner will be randomly selected to win a book. The contest is super easy to enter. I ask a simple question of what does shooting mean to you, and you can take a simple 1-sentence answer or stretch it out into paragraphs if you like. It's completely up to you. I'm keeping it very simple in hopes of getting a lot of interest and buzz going on about this contest, because we're going to be doing it. We're going to be doing a variety of contests for the next year. So in addition to that contest, I'm also going to be giving away 3 license keys for my gun database at the end of actually, I won't be giving them away at the end of this podcast, but I'll be giving you information on how you can win those at the end of this podcast. And then, I guess we'll announce them next show or something like that. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it yet. I'm going to wing it between now and when I actually start talking about the software. So with all that said, I think I've got everything out of the way that I wanted to discuss prior to getting rolling with the news. So let's get started with the news. Alright, in the news this week, we kick things off with a piece of news that comes out of Kansas City from Fox News 4. And it goes on to say, the news piece is entitled, "Homeowners with Guns Fight Back." If you're interested in watching, the primetime news feature that went along with this, I'm going to try to embed it if I can. If not, head over to my show notes and click through. You'll be able to watch this thing unfold. But It goes on to say, Kansas City. In the wake of 2 home invasions in 3 days, some metro area homeowners, fed up with violence and willing to risk it all and fight back bad guys. Monday, a Kansas City woman, scared for her life, shot and killed a 17-year-old armed intruder. She says he forced his way inside her home near 58th and Garfield, pointed a gun at her head, and put her in a closet. Early Wednesday morning, a similar frightening situation in Raytown. Police say 2 men, one armed with a rifle, the other with a handgun, burst inside a couple's home in the 85th and Everett, demanded money, and asked for a man who didn't live there. When the home invaders ran before cops arrived, the male homeowner fired shots at the fleeing pair, who got away. It's not known if either man was hit. Police are still looking for both men. We're very fed up, said Neighborhood Watch Captain Danya Schrader. We constantly watch. We take note of who's around. Schroeder put a mini surveillance camera in her front yard to watch out for the bad guys. Back in the Kansas City neighborhood where the woman says she shot the young intruder in self-defense, Michael Robinson, a mother of 4 children, says she'd pull a pistol to protect her family. We're tired of the violence. We're tired of the killings. We're tired of the break-ins. Things got to change, she said. And basically that's it. It's a pretty short and sweet news article. It really didn't dawn on me until I was reading it for you. But in the one instance, we have a homeowner firing at fleeing robbers or fleeing burglars. I don't know that. I don't know how that would have went down had the homeowner struck and killed one of the robbers. I don't know whether that would be considered murder since he was fleeing and their homeowner was no longer in danger. But that was kind of interesting that really didn't go any further than that. It's not uncommon for the news media to jump all over something like this. Had the homeowner hit them and there were charges filed, I would have thought there would be information in the news article. The other one is kind of interesting too, where the robber bursts into the home, puts a gun to the woman's head, and puts her in a closet. I guess the gun was in the closet. Surprise! Which is it's a scary situation, but it's kind of amusing. So all in all, we have a neighborhood that's dealing with break-ins and violence, and they're fighting back. An eye for an eye sort of a thing. I hate the idea that people need to put surveillance cameras attached to their mailboxes and to their front doors so that they can see what's going on. But if they don't do something, they're going to continue to be victims. These burglars are going to continue breaking in. These criminals are going to continue walking all over these people, and it's not going to change until they stand up and start protecting themselves and their family. And after a few burglars and criminals die from breaking in and finding themselves staring down the wrong end of a gun, maybe they'll get the hint and things will change for this neighborhood. We can only hope for the best. Well, before I get started with the second piece of news, I totally spaced out and forgot to credit Nick for the news article. He was kind enough to post a comment on my blog when I did the write-up and show notes for the podcast. He included a link with the news article submission, which I asked for. So thanks, Nick. Really appreciate it. This second piece of news comes from Justin. He goes by Herf Doctor on Twitter. He submitted it to me on Twitter. And this one's kind of confusing. You have to just kind of have to get your head wrapped around this one. It's actually, you know what? I've got it all mixed up. The first one was from Herf Doctor. This one is from Nick, and vice versa. Nick commented on my blog, Herf Doctor on Twitter, and wow, that's confusing. Just like this news article. So just bear with me. This comes from Tulsa World News, and it is entitled, "Fight that left Good Friday shooting suspect's father dead ruled self-defense according to Tulsa court records." And this one goes on to say, Carl England was shot and killed at the Comanche Park Apartments on April 5th, 2010. Pernell Damon Jefferson is charged with attempted first-degree burglary and possession of a firearm after a previous felony conviction in connection with the case. Court records show the charges against him are pending. Carl England reportedly went to the apartment complex that night at the request of his daughter, whose boyfriend had had a previous altercation with Jefferson. The boyfriend, Damian Neal, and Jacob England testified at a hearing for Jefferson regarding prosecutors' application to revoke his existing suspended sentence received after Jefferson pleaded guilty to feloniously pointing a firearm in domestic assault and battery in the presence of a minor in a 2007 case. Neal testified that Jefferson came to an apartment Neal shared with Carl England's daughter, Carly Jo England, at 9:30 p.m. April 5th for marijuana, and that Neal told Jefferson that the couple didn't have that around their house. He testified that Carl England then told him she didn't know Jefferson, and Neal asked Jefferson to leave. Neal testified that Jefferson did not leave and forced his way inside by popping open the locked screen door. The men reportedly began cursing at one another, and Neal testified that Jefferson said, "Come here and let me show you something. Let's go around this corner where there ain't no cameras at." Neal said he grabbed a baseball bat, which he said he kept held down at his side. The conversation escalated, and Neal blacked out and started swinging the bat at Jefferson, he testified. Neal said he hit Jefferson with the bat, and that Jefferson told him, I'll be back, I got something for you, as he was leaving. Neal said he returned to the apartment and that Carly England called her father. Jefferson returned less than a minute later, Neal testified, and began kicking at the apartment's back door. Carl England reportedly arrived and came into the apartment through the front door as Jefferson was trying to enter through the back. Neal explained the situation to Carl England, who went outside, Neal testified. Jacob England was outside, according to Neal, and Neal and Carly England followed as Carl England went to confront Jefferson. Neal told the court he noticed that Jefferson had a gun as Carl England was walking toward him. As Jefferson walked to Carl England, Carl was trying to talk to him, and he kept walking up, so Carl defended himself and hit Jefferson over the head with a wheelbarrow handle, Neal testified. Carl England tried to hit Jefferson a second time, and Jefferson raised his pistol and shot England in the chest, Neal said. Neal told the court he saw England fall on top of Jefferson, at which point Jefferson struggled to get up and run off. Jacob England testified that he was outside the second time Jefferson tried to enter the apartment and saw Jefferson holding a gun as he kicked the apartment's back door. He told the court he did not see his father get shot, but heard the gunshot and later saw his father lying on the ground as Jefferson ran from the scene. Jefferson initially took the stand but decided not to testify after Tulsa County District Judge William Kalau explained that his testimony could be used in a 2010 case filed in connection with Carl England's death. Kalau revoked Jefferson's probation in the 2007 case and sentenced him to 6 years in prison. Jefferson is an inmate at Key Correctional Center in Fort Supply, records show. The Tulsa County District Attorney's Office did not file murder charges against Jefferson and determined that Carl England's death was a justifiable homicide, records show. Jefferson is due back in court May 7th. I don't know if you're confused, but I've read this thing about 5 times and I am still confused. There are just too many Carls and Carlys and Jeffersons and back and forth. But, the gist of it sounds as though one individual went to another individual's house looking for marijuana. They told him they didn't have any. He forced his way in. There was a scuffle. He left all upset, threatening to come back. He comes back, the daughter, I suppose, in the house calls her father, who then goes in the front door as this guy's trying to come in the back, and for whatever reason it sounds like they wind up outside again, because I'm not quite sure where a wheelbarrow handle would wind up inside the house. But there's a struggle, there's a fight, someone's shot, someone dies, and it's deemed a justifiable homicide. So it's justifiable homicide. So the way this plays out is it's kind of intriguing because there's a fight and then things cool down and then there's a fight again and then one individual attacks the other who then shoots and it's deemed a justifiable homicide, but at the same time he's at least for me, if this were going down, I would kind of be holed up in the house, and the second he came through the door, I'd blast the hell out of him. I can't say for certain, but it sounds as though like he went outside and confronted him, and things just kind of went down. The more I think about this thing, the more confusing it gets, and the more tongue-tied and just falling all over facts that I'm doing. So we're just going to leave it at that. It's an interesting story, and I would love to hear your opinion on it in the comments section. Alright, this third piece of news also comes from Justin, aka Herf Doctor on Twitter, and this also involves a justifiable homicide. However, it's not nearly as confusing as the last one. So, bear with me. This one comes from independentmail.com out of Anderson, South Carolina, and it is entitled Sheriff, No Charges to be Sought in Fatal Double Shooting in Spartanburg County. This is a little lengthy, but it's kind of interesting, so we're just going to run with it. Spartanburg County Sheriff Chuck Wright said Tuesday no charges will be filed in connection with a fatal double shooting at a West Side apartment complex on Saturday. The fatal shooting occurred at 12:10 a.m. Saturday at Lee's Crossing Apartments off Power Mill Road. Douglas Williams, 29, later told deputies that he shot two men after catching them trying to break into his apartment. Michael D'Angelo Gentry Hill, Jr., 22, died at the scene of the incident. Darren Tyree Ty Hill, 18, died at Spartanburg Regional Medical Center late Saturday morning, according to the Spartanburg County Coroner's Office. Wright said 2 shots were fired during the incident, and that Gentry Hill and Hill had single gunshot wounds to the front part of their heads. Keep note of that, the front part of their heads. But at any rate, Douglas Williams is the victim here, Wright said during a news conference Tuesday. He has a right to defend himself. Williams has a criminal record, according to the State Law Enforcement Division. According to his criminal history, he was convicted of forgery in 2008 and is prohibited by Federal Gun Control Act of 1968 from possessing or acquiring a gun or ammunition, according to the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division records. Just because someone has made a mistake doesn't mean that they can't protect themselves, Wright said. Me personally, I would have been telling someone to call 911. That should be the first option. I'd have preferred he called 911. According to investigators, Williams said his girlfriend drove up to their apartment and saw the 2 men trying to break in through a window. Wright said Williams got out of the car with his girlfriend's gun and confronted Gentry Hill and Hill from a distance of 5 to 10 feet. Gentry Hill and Hill took cover behind some air conditioning units. Wright said one of the 2 men trying to break in had a gun. The sheriff would not comment on whether the gun Williams used was registered to his girlfriend or given any information about Williams' gun or the one he found with Hill and Gentry Hill. He said the gun Hill and Gentry Hill had was near them when deputies began their investigation Saturday morning. We're doing investigations on both of those pistols, Wright said. Both men were wearing dark clothing and one had a ski mask, according to the incident report. No one was inside the apartment at the time of the shootings. Deputies searched the apartment and found pry marks on the window, Wright said. Williams did not indicate to investigators that he knew Gentry or Hill or Gentry Hill, but told deputies that Saturday was the 3rd time someone tried to break into his apartment, Wright said. Hill and Gentry Hill have criminal records as well, according to the SLED. Hill was convicted under the Youthful Offender Act in September of second-degree burglary and sentenced to 6 years in prison. That sentence was suspended upon service of 111 days in jail and 3 years of probation, according to the SLED. And he also was prohibited from possessing or acquiring a gun or ammunition. Gentry Hill's arrest record dates back to 2006 and includes mostly minor charges that were later dismissed. He was convicted of a minor purchasing or in possession of alcohol in 2011. He was not prohibited from having a gun or ammunition, according to SLED. Wright said he and investigators met with 7th Circuit Solicitor Office officials on Monday to discuss the case and determine whether charges would be filed against Williams. We were very methodical about this, Wright said. In consulting with the solicitor's office before coming to a decision on charges during the news conference, Wright cited the State versus John Brayboy, a law that says supports a convicted felon using a gun in self-defense. Solicitor Barry Barnett said under the state's castle doctrine, a person has the right to protect their property, automobile, or people on their property with the use of deadly force. According to the law, a person is presumed to have a reasonable fear of imminent peril of death or great bodily injury to himself or another person when a suspect is in the process of unlawfully and forcefully entering or has unlawfully and forcibly entered a dwelling, residence, or occupied vehicle, or if he removes or is attempting to remove another person against his will from the dwelling or occupied vehicle. Barnett also cited the State versus John Brayboy, a Spartanburg case involving a convicted felon who used a gun in self-defense. You can act lawfully if you're acting in self-defense, Barnett said. They, Gentry Hill and Hill, could have shot Williams. They had a gun. If it had been my window, I'd have called 911. But he, Williams, didn't have to do that under the law. Wright said Tuesday he continued to stand by his comments about residents obtaining concealed weapons permits and arming themselves for protection against crime. I've never encouraged anybody to shoot any person, Wright said. You only use a weapon as the last resort. I hope it sends a message to the bad guys. You better start leaving us be. The bad guys better start paying attention. Attempts to reach Williams were unsuccessful. So, kind of long, but kind of interesting as it developed. Here we have, it's 12:10 a.m. and there are two individuals trying to break into a home. Now, when I initially read this article, I'm envisioning people up on a second-story roof, hiding behind air conditioning units, trying to pry into a window, and that's why I told you to remember that, that headshot. But, reading this further, it only makes sense that they were trying to get in through a first-floor window. They weren't, like, standing on a roof or anything like that. Porch roof or something. But the girlfriend pulls up. The girlfriend has a gun, presumably is licensed to carry said gun and whatnot, and the boyfriend gets out and confronts the people that are trying to break into his house. And the really interesting thing here is that the way the castle doctrine works, it's sort of all-encompassing. It doesn't matter where the homeowner is, it seems. The homeowner can be inside or outside the house. It really doesn't matter as long as the criminal is trying to get into, said castle. They're in violation of the law, and, they can be justifiably shot, as they're trying to break in or remove someone or vehicle, blah, 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 all that big, long stuff that I read. So I thought this was kind of interesting. I'm still a little suspicious about how each of the burglars had one shot to their face, more or less, or their upper head is, I guess, what they referred to it as. So either he was a really good shot, or this was a little on the shady side. But pretty interesting article, a little on the long side, but kind of eye-opening about the castle doctrine and how it works in South Carolina. Personally, I think I would have backed off and called the police and had them, catch these people red-handed. But, at the same time, it looks like, his option of sort of going in and resolving the situation was okay according to the color of the law. So, again, interesting article all the way around. All right, well, it is about time for featured content, and if you're new to the podcast, this is kind of similar to the way I do the news. I hit Google Reader. I start looking around for interesting things that I found that pop up across the gun blogs and various forums and podcasts and things, and I just talk about them a little bit. I won't go through and read them word for word like I did the news. I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about them, try to whet your appetite, and get you to go check it out for yourself. So this week I have 3 pieces of featured content. The first piece comes from Everyday Knows Days Off, and it is on the gun store guys. If you're familiar with, or if you keep an eye on the YouTube channels, there is this one video channel called Gun Gripes, and it's handled by 2 individuals in a gun store, and I don't remember whether, I think they're in like the Tennessee area or something like that, and it's kind of interesting. A lot of times they gripe about certain things. I don't subscribe to the YouTube channel. However, I do follow Everyday No Days Off, and generally he posts all the better stuff that they do. I guess he keeps an eye on them and then blogs about it, so I don't really have to follow the YouTube channel. I can just keep an eye on Every Day No Days Off. And that's what I did to get this latest episode. This is on the psychology of gun ownership, which is pretty interesting. Because these guys are working behind the counter of a gun shop, it gives them an interesting perspective. It allows them to see a lot of new gun owners and just interaction with, your average Joe gun owner type guy. And it's really interesting, some of the things that they bring up. Sometimes they sound like they complain just for the sake of complaining. Other times they bring up really valid points. And I thought this episode was really interesting. They're talking about the mindset and psychology of new gun owners as they approach, the gun counter and start discussing different guns and things. And one of the things they talk about is how they get a lot of customers that come in and they don't really care about what they're buying. They just want something that looks scary. It doesn't really matter whether it's really shootable. If that $160 high point looks scary, that'll work. That's good enough. They're probably only going to shoot it once. That's the mindset. Or they may never need to shoot it at all. It's just sort of an insurance policy. And a lot of them don't have the mindset that you're buying this gun. It's a serious commitment, and if you're buying it and your intention and you intend on having it in the house, you really need to be prepared to use it in the event that something bad goes down and your family's in danger, or you're in danger, or another loved one is in danger. And they bounce back and forth about different different psychological topics and different mindsets of customers, and I found it to be really interesting. There was one line in this video that I thought was just fantastic. The older gentleman behind the counter said something along the lines of, or he's holding two guns, and he holds up a high point and he says, "A high point at home is better than this," and he holds up a Glock 19 on layaway. And he's talking about purchasing guns that you can afford. It doesn't do you a whole lot of good to put a Glock 19, in this case, on layaway and be paying it down for months on end before you can finally get it. If your budget allows for you to purchase a high point, get a high point, keep it in the house, or keep it on your person, do whatever you have to do to protect yourself or to keep yourself potentially protected. And that will serve you better than the gun on layaway. And I thought that was really interesting and really worth mentioning and sort of hammering home that I really do believe that. A very inexpensive $160 high point is better than a Glock 19 on layaway. I'd love to have a Glock 19. I love my Glock 17. But the fact of the matter is, he's talking about a gun in hand is better than a gun that you do not have and you are paying off over time. It just kind of makes sense. In the long run, the Glock 19 I think will be better. However, at the here and now, when it matters, when the crap hits the fan, that cheap plastic high point at $160 is the way to go. Again, versus the gun that's not there. So I thought that was really interesting. Head over to Everyday No Days Off. Check out the comments that go along with this Gun Gripes video, and check out the Gun Gripes video itself. It's pretty interesting. Well, for the second piece of featured content, I have something on USPSA shooting. Now, if you've been a fan of the podcast for a little while now, or for any length of time, by now you're probably aware that I'm very big into USPSA shooting. I'm fairly new at it, but I really enjoy shooting, reading about USPSA, watching video and seeing critiques on shooting and things like that. It's just, I find it fascinating, and anytime something like that pops up in Google Reader, it's kind of a lock. I've got to put it in the podcast because I enjoy it so much. I don't know that it works so well with the general audience that's listening or watching this podcast, but it's something that I really enjoy doing, so I like talking about it. But this particular post comes from kitlear.com. Kit is in the Area 1 area of USPSA. I'm not quite sure where that's at exactly, but she is gearing up for an Area 1 match, and she attended a sort of mini match where this one club put together some of the stages that are going to be used at the larger Area 1 match later on this year. And she had the opportunity to start practicing them. I was watching the video and looked at some of the stills, and it looks like a beautiful facility. I've never been to a place that was that large, that had that many props in use. I mean, there must have been dozens and dozens and dozens of wall sections up, and ports and doors, and just all kinds of stuff. It was really elaborate. It looked like a fantastic time. But along with that video, she's also critiquing herself. You know, she's talking about how she addressed this stage, her score, her hit factor, her time, you know, what she's concerned about here, where she thinks she could do a little better, where she stumbled. And she goes through this whole thing stage by stage by stage. And if that wasn't interesting enough, she had a comment by someone I believe named Brian, who went even more in depth over this whole thing. And I was just really fascinated. I'm reading over his comments, and then I'm skipping back up, reading her stuff, watching the video, skipping back down, you know, reading his comments, jumping back up, watching the video again, and I'm sort of piecing the puzzle together. And he just had some really interesting observations. Things that definitely relate to my shooting. It seems Kit had some issues, some of the same issues that I do with the order in which I'm engaging arrays, and you know, there were some of those things that were talked about. You know, getting into position, getting out of position, just really interesting stuff. I loved reading it, and Brian's comment was so in depth and long. I couldn't help but jump on there and thank him, because I really do think it related a lot to my shooting, and I was able to sort of cross-reference, and I learned quite a bit from that post. So if you're into USPSA shooting or competitive shooting in general, it's well worth heading over to kitlear.com. I'll have the link in my show notes. Click through, and after you get done reading and watching Kit's explanation in video, check out Brian's comment down below. It's well worth, you know, cross-referencing it and sort of bouncing back and forth. Just really interesting. Well, for the last piece of featured content, I have something that's pretty interesting but fairly old. The other day I was on the Gun Rights Radio Network forums, and I just happened to click you know, display all new posts. It's something I do fairly often, but something caught my eye about a Wisconsin story where there's a man who shot a robber, talks about his ordeal. So it seemed interesting enough. I clicked through. Mark Vanderberg, the head honcho of the Gun Rights Radio Network, posted this originally and mentioned that Gail Pepin posted this initially on Facebook, and you know, he thanked her for doing it. And that was back in February 5th. For whatever reason, I saw it again recently. But you know, for whatever reason, it popped up as new, and it doesn't look like it really was. Maybe I was poking around in the forum and it popped up. For whatever reason, I watched the video, and it was pretty interesting. It's not real long. It's about 2.5 minutes. And basically, it's sort of like a news conference. There's a guy standing in front of a podium. There's a bunch of microphones in front of him, and he's discussing an incident where he shot a robber. He was in a store with his wife, and a guy came in with a shotgun down his sleeve, and he's getting violent. He's robbing the store. He's, you know, screaming at the clerk, you know, demanding money. He's swinging the shotgun around wildly. He's pointing it at, you know, the patrons of the store, and this individual decides that, you know, he's got to do something. He feels as though his life's in danger. His wife is in danger. You know, this guy's getting really violent and getting upset with the cashier, and you know, he wants to do something about it. He says he pulls his gun out, racks the slide to put a round in the chamber, which again is kind of a hiccup for me. He talks about going to training and things like that, and I'm not quite sure why he didn't already have a round in the chamber. But for whatever reason, the burglar or the robber must not have heard him rack the slide to put a round in the chamber. He ultimately decides that he's got to do something, and he starts firing at the guy with the shotgun that's robbing, you know, the store. Before that happens, he's able to get the attention of a customer that's standing directly behind the robber, and you know, tells him get out of the way, and you know, he starts shooting. He says he fires a couple shots. He hits the guy. He goes down. The threat is neutralized. He doesn't say whether or not the guy lives or dies, but The interesting thing is, this guy calmly telling the story. I don't know that, if I were involved in something like this, I don't know how comfortable I would be standing up in front of a news media discussing the events of what happened. Even if the police decided, okay, we're not going to charge you, it was justifiable, you acted in self-defense. I don't know that I would be comfortable unless I had my lawyer standing right next to me, whispering in my ear what I was to tell the news media. Because I'd be so afraid of incriminating myself or opening myself up to a civil lawsuit or something that I don't know that I would feel comfortable doing this. But again, it's 2.5 minutes long. It's really interesting. Definitely check out this guy's story and how he ended a robbery and protected himself, his loved ones, and the patrons, his fellow patrons in the store. Well, it is time for one of my favorite parts of the podcast, and that is the cigar and drink pairing. We'll get the drink pairing part of the way out of the way quickly because I've discussed it a number of times before. The coffee that I'm drinking is Caribou. If you're interested in it, just look up, I don't know, probably the last 15 podcasts I probably mentioned it 7 or 8 times. The cigar is the La Aurora 107 in this big behemoth Figurado size. La Aurora is a factory down in the Dominican Republic, and when they announced the 107, I don't know, I guess it was a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, there was a lot of buzz about it. It was something new and fresh for La Aurora. It was a medium, mid-level price cigar, $6, $7, $8, depending on your geographical area. And, it was a good, bold, flavorful cigar, very interesting. The smaller sizes were a smash hit. The Corona was fantastic. Later on, they released a Lancero. There was a huge buzz about that. A whole Twitter promotion was ramped up around it or built around it. The release of that single cigar. People were just going crazy over this stuff. Well, along the way, La Aurora also started producing larger sizes of the cigar, and every larger size of the cigar I tried, I liked less and less. The Robusto, while marginally bigger than the Corona, we're talking like 46 ring gauge versus 50 ring gauge, just had a watered down, kind of airy, maybe boring tone to it, and it just really never did anything for me. I've always gravitated towards the Corona. I actually like the Corona a lot more than I do Lancero. People sort of flip-flop on that one, but I prefer the Corona. I also tried what they call the Grand 107, which was a 6x60 behemoth, and it was downright boring. Hated that cigar. It just absolute airball. My opinion is the larger these 107s get, the more flavorless they become, and this big behemoth Figurado is no different. It's just very airy. There's really nothing appealing about it. I'm finding it to be kind of boring. I've been smoking this for about an hour and a half now, and there's just been no change. The flavor profile is a little woody, but it's just a very bland, smoky flavor. I'm not getting really anything particular about it. The finish is neutral. It's not real dry, but it's not creamy either. It's easy on the palate. It's not offensive or anything, but it's just a whole lot of just middle of the road. Nothing really shines about this cigar. So if you're ever going to try a 107, I would strongly suggest going for the smaller ring gauge stuff. Pick up the Corona. It's an awesome cigar. It's usually like $6, maybe $7. It's a little on the spendy side for a Corona, but I think they're really worth it. I like them I like them a lot. The Lancero is good, but I really don't know how whether they're still being produced or how often they're hitting the market. For my money, I say stick with the Corona. If you're going to purchase La Aurora 107 Coronas, or if you're even interested in trying the larger sizes, my suggestion would be to contact my preferred retailer, which is Buckhead Cigar down in Atlanta, Georgia. You can pick up the phone and give Mike a call at 404-844-0400. Mike is also on Twitter as @BuckheadCigar. He is on Google Plus and Facebook as Buckhead Cigar as well. And if you're interested in looking up some of the more recent product that Mike has brought in and is featuring, you can head over to AskTheCigarGuys.com. It's not a retail site, however, it just it's sort of specials list of all the new and on sale product that Mike's got going on. So head over to askthecigarguys.com, take a look at some of the newer stuff that Mike has, pick up the phone, order some stuff, tell him you heard about him through the podcast, and not only will you be supporting my favorite cigar retailer, but also a fellow gun guy as well. In episode 35 of Shooting the Breeze, last week's gun podcast, I talked about a review of My Gun Database by Christine Zump of AKs and Cupcakes, and I talked about how interesting the software looked. My Gun Database is an inventory system for guns, ammo, and accessories. Now, after I saw that review, I retweeted Christine's original tweet in an attempt to win a license, and I made a comment on her review, talking about some of the things that I found interesting and, some of the things that I would like to see. And I caught the attention of Alan, the developer. And Alan offered me a free license, to give the software a go. And I was really happy to accept, and I told him, I'd be discussing the software on my podcast later on. Well, I've been running the software for about a week now, and I thought it was about time to talk about it. Now, my original plan was to wipe my database clean and then do a screencast as I walked through entering firearms and accessories into the database. I thought that would give you a good look at how the system works, all the different variables, plug-in information that you can do, and I thought it would be really cool. However, on thinking about it a little bit more, I thought, I can't do that with the podcast. I have about a 50-50 split. Half of my audience watches the video portion of the podcast. The other half listens to the audio-only version, which is just the audio stripped away from the video. And if I did the screencasting, I would essentially alienate half my audience, because I'd be talking about, see, you can do this and you can do that, and they'd be thinking, see what? I can't see anything, I'm listening. So I'll do that later on. At some point in the future, I'll put together a screencast as I walk through entering fictional firearms into the database so that you can see how it works. Or you can just give it a try yourself. But either way, that's something I plan on doing in the future. For right now, I just want to talk about the software and my experience with it. So, first and foremost, My Gun Database is a piece of software that's developed on the Adobe Air platform, or the Adobe Air service. Now, basically, in a nutshell, what Adobe Air allows you to do is install the base on a variety of systems. You can install it on Mac, Windows, or Linux. And once that base platform is in there, you can then install Adobe Air applications that run off of that base. So it basically gives you a piece of software that runs on a variety of systems. You've got more or less the same application running on a Mac that would be running on a Windows PC, which would be running on a Linux PC. It makes them sort of cross-compliant or compatible across various systems because it all runs off this base. At least that's how I understand it. So you've got a piece of software that works on a variety of systems, and there's just a really good chance that regardless of what system you're running on your computer, this software will work for you. Now, some of the features that come along with My Gun Database is that it keeps a digital copy of your firearm inventory. I'm reading this off of the website. It allows you to print inventory, financial, and A&D reports, view stats about your collection, track your purchases and sales, be notified when a firearm is past its maintenance schedule. It's built on Adobe Air, so it runs Windows, Mac OS X, version 10.5 Plus, and Linux. Constantly being updated and new features added, and it's amazing. I've been using it for about a week now, and constantly being updated is an understatement. Alan seems to be very keyed in on feedback, and he just seems to be eager to receive it and very open to talking about his stuff. So I was really, really impressed with that part. It's an extremely awesome and good-looking developer. I can't. He's pretty awesome. I don't know about the good-looking part, but. Some of the version comparisons. The free version is fully functional but limited to 10 or less firearms. So you can install this software without a license, and you can enter up to 10 firearms into your database. There's a basic registration which disables ammo, maintenance, and holster tabs, A&D reports, and limits images per firearm to 3 or less. The full registration just enables everything, and you've got a wide open piece of software. So it's kind of scalable. If you have few firearms like I do, the free license will work. It'll allow you to enter up to 10 firearms. If you have you have a few more than 10 firearms, or you want to incorporate holsters, accessories, reports, things like that, it's $20 to open that up. If you want just full-blown registration, it's $40. Okay, so now that we've talked about the licenses and how the system works, let's talk about the software itself. Now, when I first installed this, I opened it up, I incorporated the registration key, it unlocked everything, and I'm just staring at a lot of stuff. It's kind of overwhelming. There are just tabs everywhere to start incorporating information. Now, you're looking at a general sheet. You tell it you want to add a firearm, it pops up a window asking for manufacturer, importer, model, country of origin, date manufactured, serial number. You can incorporate a description into all that. Firearm type, caliber, condition, whether or not it's a CNR license, storage location, finish type, finish percentage. If you have it insured, there is a box for you to import or to incorporate who the person that appraised the firearm was, the appraisal value, the date appraised, the current value, the date current value, who it's insured by, the insured value, the date insured, the status of the firearm, on whether or not it's at consignment or you own it, an identifier and an owner. That is just one window when you add a new firearm. There are just a ton of other stuff that goes along with it. So you can see it's kind of overwhelming. When I was kind of overwhelmed, I really didn't know what to do. So I'm kind of staring at the screen and I thought, okay, baby steps. I set my laptop aside and I walked over and started going through all of my firearm paperwork. When I purchase a firearm, I keep all the forms together: the state form, the receipt, the actual sales receipt, which is generally a big written thing with serial number information on it. And I grabbed one by one. I took one packet of information, say for my M&P, and I brought that back to the computer and I started plugging in information. After you plug in that information, you can head over to a purchased/sold tab. Now here you can enter the information, the business name on where you bought it, the name of the person you purchased it from, their FFL license number, their phone number, their address, city, state, and zip, the date acquired, the price you paid for it, the purchase order number, and the transaction number. Now, once you start plugging in this information, it's saved. So if like me, you purchase most of your firearms from a single retailer, when you go to enter your next firearm, you can tell it, okay, the business name is The Handgunner in Topton, Pennsylvania, and it'll plug all that information in for you. You don't have to type it. The only thing you'll need to put in there again is the purchase price, the PO number, and the transaction number. Now, once all of that information is in there, you can head over to a picture tab, and it allows you to drag and drop, or actually I don't think you can drag and drop, you have to use an add window, and you can start incorporating photos of the firearms. So for instance, if for whatever reason you have a gun that's been handed down from your great-great-grandfather to your great-grandfather, from your great-grandfather to your grandfather to your father, and now all of a sudden you have it. You have this old family heirloom. Okay, you've had it appraised, all this other stuff, it's valuable, you want to catalog it. So if you have the full-blown license, you're taking photos of the gun itself, any identification marks, serial numbers, anything that's unique to the firearm. If it's got some sort of engraving or some specialized marking or mismatched serial numbers or whatever the case may be, you can get all kinds of up close and personal, take dozens of pictures and start incorporating them into this, so that later on when you go to whether it's file a claim with your insurance company, report the gun stolen, or you're just looking over your inventory, you can start scanning through all the various photos. Now, when you have the full-blown version, there's also an option to include accessories and holsters. Now, in my case, No, at any rate, I was trying to get out of a window, but I'm in the process of editing something, and now it's throwing an error. But at any rate, in the case of my Smith & Wesson M&P, it's a USPSA gun that I use for competitive shooting, and it has accessories associated with it. So what I can do is start incorporating accessories. I have one specific holster for it. So I incorporate the holster, I take a picture of the holster, I describe the holster, I incorporate all the information for said holster and how it works. So for instance, I have information for the manufacturer, the style, whether it's inside the waistband, outside the waistband, the connector type, the belt size that it uses, the colors, description, the material that it's made out of, leather, kydex, nylon, plastic, synthetic, does it have a thumb brake, does it have ammo loops, the price that you paid for it. So again, lots and lots of information here for one accessory. After you get done incorporating the holster, then you can start incorporating accessories, extra magazines, my Black Hawk magazine pouch, my ITAC magazine pouch, and I get all this stuff incorporated, and along with the same information or similar information, the item, the type of item that it is, the count, description, purchase price, current value, capacity, whether or not it's a magazine, and whether or not you want to include in the firearm price. Now, once you have these accessories incorporated into the database, you can then attach them to a specific firearm. You can also attach photos. You can also associate photos with these accessories. So you're creating a really dense catalog of items. And in just a few minutes, I'm able to incorporate my Smith & Wesson M&P, all of the accessories that I have for it, and my holster, which is separate, and then sort of attach it all to the M&P. So when I look up statistics for my M&P, I can see all of the stuff that goes along with it. Now, there's also a stats tab for the firearm, which I forgot to mention, which the firearm stats allows you to tell it what type of action it is, barrel length, overall length, stock type, sights, grip, trigger pull, weight, twist rate, NFA items and classifications. There's a bunch of variables there, whether or not it's suppressed, and then at the bottom it'll give you an overall stats of value, total guns collected, things like that. And that's as far as I've gotten with the software. I've added, I believe, 7 or 8 guns into the system, and I haven't started working on the ammo stuff. I started playing around with the maintenance for my Glock 17 because I had work done to it, so I incorporated that into it. There's also a Guns America RSS feed. I'm imagining there's some sort of advertiser or something, or they're associated with the software in some form, because there's just a list of their stuff. And there's search parameters that you can search the database for. So it's kind of overwhelming. There's just so much stuff here, but I really started getting into it. I'm incorporating my firearms, all the accessories, all the information for it. And one of the really nice things about this is, from what I understand, this whole software follows the FFL guidelines for digital bound books. So if you're a CNR license holder, this should qualify for your bound book. You have to keep logs of all your transactions and things like that. And this, from what I understand, qualifies as your digital bound book. So it seems to do a ton of stuff. I really like it. I wish it did more, to be honest with you. I spent, a couple of hours messing around with the software, adding in all my stuff, and then I was kind of bummed out because I was done. If I want to add more stuff, I've got to go run out and I've got to buy another gun, which is kind of cost prohibitive to use the software some more. I just wish that it did more. Christine, in her review, mentioned that there was going to be some form of range log feature added into this. As I said back when I was talking about Christine's review, if there was a range log added into this, I could see dropping $40 on this in a heartbeat. It would allow. I'm sort of anal when it comes to range log or logging activity, USPSA matches, practice sessions, dry fire practice, all that sort of stuff. I like having it all there. I like messing around with numbers so that I can see a visual progression, whether or not I'm improving or whether my times are dipping, my accuracy is dipping. So if stuff like that were incorporated into this, if there was a range log thrown in, this thing would be an absolute winner. I'm really happy with it, but if it did more stuff than it already does, I mean, it's really impressive how much this piece of software does, but if it did even more, I'd be absolutely thrilled. Again, I'm really happy with it as is, but it would be freaking awesome if there was a range log system incorporated into this. So that in a nutshell is my opinion of my gun database. Now, as I said earlier, I am going to be giving away, as I think I said it in the beginning of the podcast, I have 3 licenses to give away courtesy of Alan of my gun database. So here's what I want you to do. If you're interested in winning a license for my gun database, head over to waltnpa.com, click on the this podcast post, Shooting the Breeze, episode 36, and in the comments section, all you have to do is tell me the first firearm that you're entering into my gun database. 1 entry per person. Just in the comments section, tell me what firearm you're going to be adding into my gun database, the first one after installing it, and you're entered. I'll randomly select 3 comments, and I'll give the information to Alan. Alan will give you a free license, and you're off and running. So definitely check out my gun database, even if you're just going to play around with the free stuff. I'm just really impressed with this, and Alan seems very open to talking about his software and incorporating things, and I just see a lot of good things to come. I'm really eager to see what he's going to do next with it. Even though I've only been dealing with this for a very short period of time, I'm really impressed with it. So definitely check it out. Wow, I talked about my gun database for 16 minutes, and I forgot stuff. I forgot to mention the Dropbox integration, the database encryption for security, and just, wow. Maybe I'll talk about those when I do the screencast. But at any rate, before I let you get out of here, I want to remind you again, head over to waltnpa.com for the contest to win 1 of 3 license keys for my gun database. And I'm also running 1 contest per month for a signed copy of Shoot, Your Guide to Shooting in Competition by Julie Golub. You'll have to look for both of those posts. The first one is Shooting the Breeze, episode 36. Click it, comment in the show notes for the My Gun Database entry. The other one, just look for the April edition of win a signed copy of Shoot, and get your entry in there. So 2 contests that are currently running. The second contest for the signed book runs all month, and I'll be doing one contest a month for the next 12 months. The My Gun Database contest will end next week when I record the next podcast on Monday of next week. So I should probably look up what the date will be on that. Oh no, we're waiting for information to populate. April 23rd, I'm going to draw a winner. So get your entries in before April 23rd for the My Gun Database registration contest. If you're interested in getting in touch with me via email, question, comments, you just want to talk, whatever the case may be, you can do so via my blog, waltnpa.com. Click on the contact button and then fill in the boxes, hit submit, and it'll fire it off to me. If you'd rather plug in my information into your email client, it's walt@waltnpa.com. I'm on Twitter as @waltw, Facebook and Google Plus as Walt White. I have a blog Facebook page, which is Walt in PA. I would really appreciate if you search me out on Facebook and give me a like. I'm on the Gun Rights Radio Network forum. I have a Shooting the Breeze section where we can discuss. Each episode gets its own new post and things like that. And I think I've talked way more than I need to for this episode. So with that said, I'm going to thank you for watching, listening, downloading, and or subscribing to episode 36 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of waltnpa.com. waltnpa.com. And until next time, take it easy.
You can hear Gun Rights Radio Network on Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher allows you to listen to your favorite shows directly from your iPhone, Android phone, BlackBerry, or Palm phones, on demand and on the go. Don't have Stitcher? Download it for free today at Stitcher.com or in the app stores. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Gun Rights Radio Network shows can be found under Sources.